Hi there everyone, Lars here with another Writer's Rant, brought to you by Camille's Harem. Not just a podcast for novice writers by novice writers, but also a YouTube channel by novice writers for novice writers. Because writing is an adventure, it's more fun with friends, and I am going to rant today about how hard it is to properly pace your story. You know, this is one of the really annoying things about writing. This is a common criticism that we hear all the time and that we, even ourselves on Camille's Harem, have thrown out there in the past. Pacing. And no, I'm not talking about the delicious salsa. I'm talking about the speed of your story. How you get from point A to point Z, the speed in which you communicate your plot. How well are things paced out? How are the subplots doing in all of this? Is everything meshed well together like a beautiful braid? Or is it just a messy knot that just you'd have no idea what's going on anymore? Pacing is essential. Pacing is that timing that makes the proper joke land at the right time. Pacing is what makes a beautiful romantic relationship feel like it is fulfilling, feel like it is realistic as it goes from point to point to point, from progression to progression. Pacing is also what allows action to really be fun, as it's just quick and witty and just awesome. Pacing is also that time where you have to slow things down for people to really become immersed in the emotion, whether that be the anger, the depression, the worry, the anxiety. Pacing encompasses all of these things. And if you get the pacing wrong, it ruins everything that you're working on. Like I said, pacing is a criticism that is so often thrown out there, but without any sort of hint or recommendation for how to improve it. And honestly, I think I understand why. Because it is one of the hardest things to actually nail down as a writer. And yet at the same time, it might just be one of the most natural things that you do. Just makes it even more frustrating. So let me explain myself right here. First of all, why it comes naturally. Well, number one, you are the writer. You have your vision for what your story should be, whether that be a romance, a mystery, a thriller, a horror story, action, fantasy, whatever. You know what you are writing. And quite honestly, when you are focusing on what you actually want to write, the pacing comes pretty naturally. Like, if I'm writing a story about a spy or a thief who must go and steal these secret codes from the enemy, or steal this precious gem from some evil warlord, chances are I'm going to have quite a bit of planning in there. It's going to be slow at the beginning, but when the heist finally comes, it's going to be fast, it's going to be bombastic, it's going to be nerve-wracking, on the edge of your seat, so I'm going to write that way, and that just makes sense. The problem is when you actually get into the weeds of your story, because as you write, you will begin to discover other things that you wish to include within your story. Maybe a new character pops up because, hey, you know what? This scene needs to be a little bit more dynamic. So I'm going to add in a new character that's really going to bring something to life here, or who is going to challenge my heroes. Or maybe you need to have another chapter to slow things down a little bit and make sure that you are properly planning out that heist. Or another chapter to focus on a romantic interest. Or maybe you need just an extra chapter to kind of give yourself some breathing room between chapters of action, because too much action does get exhausting. It is honestly in these moments of discovery that you find these elements that really build up your story in good ways, but they begin to mess around with the pacing. And then in the editing process, you're like, wait a second, well, what am I going to do with this? Because I actually now need this character, I need this scene, I need this chapter, but it throws off the pacing. Already, I think you begin to see right here that pacing, while it comes actually pretty naturally if you're focusing on what you want to do, it gets messed up as the story grows and progresses because, well, things happen. And honestly, it's kind of hard to maintain that same level of concentration and effort from page 1 all the way to wherever your story ends. Unless you're writing only 5 pages. Then I hope you can be really consistent with that. So I think that the best novice writer's advice that I can give on the subject of pacing is this. You have to know your story. Know what it is that you are writing. This is something that I've gotten wrong in the past, where I'm writing this great fantasy action story, and then I just go on for chapter after chapter doing character exploration. And here's the thing, character exploration is great. A story lives or dies by its characters. But then I just end up with this blob of like 8 or 9 chapters of just intense character study, and there's not a whole lot going on. It's like I've pumped the brakes to be like, look kids, look at that fantastic rosebush over there and those beautiful butterflies. Let's stare at that for the next 15 minutes while we're on the freeway. That is not what you want to have happen. You want it to be natural. So again, you have to remember what it is that you are writing. So, as I think then about my fantasy action stories that I've written, I want to make sure that I'm constantly providing action and providing plenty of fantasy. However, I still need those moments where characters can stop and reflect a little bit. So maybe have 1 or 2 chapters where things get to calm down, we get a chance to have a breather, the characters recollect what's happened, they reorganize, or they realize that they've learned something or that they've lost something, and that then can then be used to help set up the next bit of action. So that way I get my proper breathers where I need them, and I continue this awesome action while having good character moments. It's also very possible to have great character realization and great character development in the middle of a great action sequence. However, you once again can't just pump the brakes and say, look everyone, look at how my character is growing. Because when you do that, it just really takes you out of the action. This is a problem that so many shonen series have, and really it doesn't work. I know that Naruto made it a thing, and also like Dragon Ball Z has its moments where it stops and pauses for the great build-up, but no, that really doesn't actually work. We want to have consistency. We want to have good pacing. A great example of action and character development would actually be within stories such as the Da Vinci Code, where you have just these incredible races and these mind games and stuff, where the characters really have to go from point A to point Z really, really fast, try not to get caught or killed along the way, and it is, again, in those short breather moments that we get some really great character development. But also we get to see character development in how they begin to make choices that aren't so self-centered, but really are beginning to look at the bigger picture. In fact, Angels and Demons is probably a better example of that, also from Dan Brown. Another great example would be Fury Road. Mad Max Fury Road is a fantastic movie, and I think is an excellent exemplar of what you can do with an action film that's just constantly ratcheting it up, but knows how to pace the development of the action. It's a slow build-up to just this massive crescendo of violence and character realization, and it is brilliantly paced out with proper moments here, here, and here to let you realize how the characters are developing in just this horrible situation of running away from Immortan Joe. But it's not just about the action stories. Let's also think about mystery right here. Mystery stories are absolutely fascinating because they're very slow paced, and that's very intentional because you want to completely draw the reader in to see all of these different details, some of which are viable clues and others are red herrings. A really, really fantastic example of this is The 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle, an absolutely phenomenal read, chock full of so much great character development, so many fantastic clues, and yet there are so many red herrings along the way. The story takes its time to build up every moment before then a murder happens, because there's plenty of murder in this story, and really, like, each mini arc within the story is its own murder mystery. And I just think that, for one thing, that's absolutely phenomenal. But once again, it's a really great class study of how you slowly build up a story, how you use the slow pacing inherent in a mystery story to build up the tension, leading to a very brief climax before you move on to the next thing. Then there is romance. With romance, you want to really pace this one on out, again, depending actually on what you want to do. Some romance stories kind of buck the trend of that they get together at the end and decide to have the characters come together sooner. This can work brilliantly if you are in it for the long haul. One of the things I really enjoy from the series Dragon Prince is how two of the characters get together at a time that you didn't think that they would get together. So in many ways, it seems like the pacing kind of like got kicked into overgear, but then what is brilliant is that we get almost a whole season of these characters as a couple working things out, talking with each other, slowly building up to a much stronger relationship, and it has such beautiful payoff at the very end. That is an excellent example in pacing. So again, I would say know the story that you want to tell. When you know what story you want to tell and how you want to tell it, the pacing becomes natural. But you have to remember what story it is that you're telling, because as you write, you are going to discover things that are going to be awesome that your story will most likely need, but these road bumps are very easily going to derail the pacing. So you have to figure out how you're going to balance all of these things. And that is ultimately in the editing process. Pacing really comes in where you edit. This is something that, once again, I feel like a lot of critics just kind of jump over. That you write out your initial story, you have your fun with it, but it's in the editing where you really hammer down the pacing. This is something that, once again, I've had to learn for myself as an author. I've brought before, I hate editing. I love writing down new concepts and everything and just running with it, but when it comes to editing, it's so hard for me to do. But it is absolutely essential. And what you learn as you do more and more edits of your own work, you begin to realize, oh yeah, you know what? This chapter can be shortened. Maybe this scene needs to be axed. Or maybe I just got to bite the bullet and I have to rewrite a whole bunch of stuff in order to make it so that a character progresses in a natural or in a quicker way that better complements the overall story, or that the plot comes to fruition much quicker than I originally intended, or maybe it needs to go on a little bit longer. You have to be honest with yourself in the editing process. And that can be really difficult to do, and honestly, that's a book-by-book basis, which is why it is so important that you have your own writing group to help you out with these decisions, because they can help you see the issues in the pacing that you might not. Alright, so that's about as much novice writing advice as I can give on pacing. It is still something that I am learning how to do better, and I know that eventually I might look back at this video and be like, oh, young Lars, you, tisk, 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 what silly novice advice you've got there. But as for right now, I really do think that those are two things that we should all take to heart as writers. Number one, know the story that you want to tell, and that will really help out with the pacing. Number two, the pacing is in the editing. Get that down, and your story will flow so much better. So, with that being said, if you're looking for more writing advice, please check out our other videos here on Camille's Harem. Also, please go check out our podcast episodes found on Podbean, iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, the works. We also have writing exercises over at our Pinterest page, and we would love for you to check out all of our other sites where you can mix and mingle with our writing community. Again, you need to have your own group of writers to help you out, and we would love to accompany you on this journey as you have been accompanying us. Thank you for joining us, and until the next video, y'all, tschüss.